I have buried men in ground so frozen I had to burn a fire on it for a day just to break the crust. I have watched a river take a horse and give back nothing. I am not a soft man, and I will not pretend to you that I am. But there is one sound I have never learned to carry, and it is the sound of a child asking for something the world has already decided to keep. I heard that sound in a cabin near the top of the Sanger Range in the worst winter of my 60 years from a girl no bigger than a sack of meal. She was on her knees beside a man who could not answer her, and what she asked for was not food or warmth or her own life. She asked for her brother. "Papa, please bring him home." I could have kept walking. God knows I meant to. But some doors, once you look through them, close behind you whether you step in or not. What I found up that mountain was not what any of us feared. It was worse than fear and kinder than mercy, and I have been trying to whittle the shape of it out of pine wood ever since. Sit close, this one still cost me to tell. The storm found me first, the way trouble always does from behind and without knocking. I had been 3 weeks alone with my mule, and a man gets so he can go a long stretch without human speech and not notice the lack of it. My name is Amos Field. I trap and I trade and I keep out of the way of most everything with 2 legs, and I had spent that autumn working the high creeks where the marten grow thick, planning to winter low before the passes closed. I planned poorly. That is the short and honest account of it. The snow came a full moon early, and it came mean, and by the second afternoon I could not see the ears of my own mule for the white of it. The mule's name is Deacon, on account of he is patient and disapproving and looks at me like I have sinned. He is the only creature I speak to regular anymore. I told him we were in a fix, and he flicked one ear, which is Deacon, for I have been telling you that since noon. I keep my hands busy when I am afraid. Always have. My father used to cuff me for it, said fidgeting was the devil looking for work, but the habit outlived him, and it outlived a good deal else besides. So while Deacon picked his slow way along the shoulder of the mountain, I had my knife out and a scrap of pine in my mitten, and I was whittling. Not anything, just taking curls off the wood, letting the shape come. It steadies me, and when the fear gets real bad, bad enough it has a face, I give it a name so I can look at it plain. That afternoon I named the storm Winifred, after a woman who once left me at a trading post in the rain, and I told Deacon that at least this Winifred had the decency to be honest about wanting me dead. That is when I smelled the smoke. You would not think a man could smell wood smoke through a blizzard, but you can, if the wind is right and you have lived by your nose long enough. It was thin, and it was wrong somehow, too thin, a fire being fed by a hand that had stopped believing in it. I turned Deacon toward it. There was no decision in it, understand. In that country, in that weather, you go to the smoke. You go to the smoke because next time it might be your smoke and you will want someone to come. The cabin sat in a fold of the mountain where 2 ridges leaned together to break the wind. Small. A lean-to for stock empty, the door of it banging. No dog came out. That was the first thing I marked, because a place like that always has a dog, and a silent one means the dog is dead or gone or too grieved to bark, and none of those are good. Snow had drifted up the north wall near to the eave. Nobody had shoveled in a day at least. I hollered from Deacon's back, the way you do so as not to get shot for a bear, and my voice came back to me flat and small off the trees. Nothing answered. Then when I had climbed down and got near the door, something did. A voice high and thin as the smoke, saying words I could not make out but did not need to because I knew the shape of them. It was praying. A child was in there praying. I have kicked in doors before and been sorry for it, so I knocked, which is a foolish thing to do in a blizzard, but my mother raised me to it. When nothing came but the praying, I lifted the latch and put my shoulder to the wind and went in and pulled the door shut behind me, and stood there dripping and steaming while my eyes learned the dark. There was one room. There was a bed against the far wall, and a man in it, and the man was the source of the wrongness in the smoke, because he was too far gone to tend a fire, and there was no one else grown to do it. His face had the tallow color. His breathing came in that slow, deep, laboring way, each one like a bucket hauled up from a deep well, and between the breaths there was a silence long enough that I found myself counting, the way you count between the lightning and the thunder to know how far off the killing is. And at the foot of the bed, on her knees on the cold floor with her hands pressed flat together and her eyes squeezed shut, was the girl. She could not have been 7, hair the color of a fox in summer, matted on one side from sleeping sitting up. She had a man's wool sock on one hand for a mitten, and the other hand was bare and blue at the tips. She did not open her eyes when the wind came in with me. She did not open them at all. She just kept on with her whispering, and now that I was inside, I could hear the words, and the words were these. "Papa, please bring him home. Papa, please, please bring him home." She was not talking to God. That took me a moment to understand, and when I did, it sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. She was talking to the man in the bed, to her father. She was asking her father, that gray, dying, breath-counting man who could not lift his own hand to bring somebody home, as if he still could, as if he had ever failed her before and this would be no different. As if the whole broken world could be set right if she just asked her papa nice enough times, the way you do when you are small and your father is still the largest fact of your life and death has not yet been introduced to you properly. I have carried some weight in my time. I have never carried anything heavier than the first minute in that room. "Girl," I said. My voice came out like a rusted hinge. She flinched then, and her eyes came open, and I saw they were the kind of green you find in creek ice, and I saw that she was not surprised to see a stranger, which meant she had gone past surprise into some place flatter and worse. "Girl, I'm a friend. I smelled your smoke. Where's your ma?" "In the ground," she said, plain as weather. "Since the leaves." "And your pa here?" She looked at him and her chin went, just a little, the way a chin does before it gives up its dignity, and then she got hold of it and held on. 7 years old and she got hold of it. "He fell," she said. "The tree Caleb was cutting come down wrong and it caught his leg and then the leg went bad. It smells bad now. Under the wrap. Caleb said don't look under the wrap." And her eyes came back to me, and there was the whole of it in them, everything she had been carrying alone in that cold room while she prayed to a man who couldn't answer. "Caleb went for the doctor. 4 days now. He said 2. He said 2 days there and back, and he'd bring the doctor and Papa'd be well." She swallowed. "Papa, please bring him home," she whispered again, but this time to me or to the room or to no one. "Please." Caleb then? The him was a boy. Her brother gone 4 days into a country that kills grown men in one to fetch a doctor for a father the doctor could not have saved even had he come. I did not say that last part. There are truths you set down gentle, and there are truths you do not set down at all, and I had known the smell that was coming off that bed for 30 years. It was in the room with us already, the way it gets, Swedish and wrong under the wood smoke. Her father was not going to see the spring. He was, I judged, not going to see the week. I want to tell you I had a plan. I did not. I had a mule freezing outside, a girl I could not leave, a dying man I could not help, and a boy 4 days lost that I had no business chasing. That is the arithmetic of that night, and no matter how I ran the figures, they came out the same. Too much, and me alone to answer it. So I did the only thing a man can do with a problem too big to solve, which is to make the next small thing right, and then the one after that. I got Deacon into the lean-to and rubbed him down and gave him what I had. I brought in wood from the pitiful little stack and built the fire up until the room stopped being a place where breath showed. I found the meal barrel most empty and the meat gone entirely, and I made a thin gruel and got some into the girl, whose name I learned was Nell, spoon by spoon, because she had been feeding what little there was to her father and taking near nothing herself. She ate like an animal that has learned to distrust food, watching me the whole time. The father woke once while I was there. His eyes found me and were clear for a moment, which is a thing the dying do, a cruel little gift of lucidity right at the end, like the light a lamp throws just before the oil's gone. He looked at me and he said, in a voice with no more weight than a moth, "You seen my boy?" "No," I said, "I would not lie to a dying man. It is a small vanity I hold to." "He went for the doctor." A long breath hauled up. "Storm come, I told him don't go, the leg don't matter, I told him." His hand moved on the blanket, hunting. "Fetch him back for me. He's a good boy. He's the man now. Fetch him back and I'll die easy." Nell had gone still by the fire. And there it was, laid across my shoulders by a man who had no right to ask it and every right in the world, in the only currency a dying father has, which is trust he cannot back. He did not know me. He was handing me his son on the strength of nothing but the fact that I had come to the smoke. That is a terrible power to be given. I have thought since that he knew he was dying and knew he could not spend his last coin on himself. So he spent it on the boy, the way you'd throw your child clear of a wagon going over. "I'll look," I said. "Not I'll bring him, I would not promise that. Weather breaks, I'll go up and look, that's all I can swear to." He nodded like it was enough. For him it had to be. His eyes closed. Nell watched me over the rim of the firelight with an expression I have seen on grown men in tight places, a kind of terrible, careful hope, like a person holding a full cup up a flight of stairs in the dark. The storm blew itself stupid all that night and half the next day. I did not sleep much. I sat by the fire with my knife and a stick, and I whittled, and the shape that came was a small horse, legs too long the way a colt is, and I did not know I was making it for the girl until it was near done. My hands do that. They know things before I do. And I named my fear sitting there. It was not the storm anymore. Winifred had gone off to torment some other fool. The new one was harder to name because it did not have a face, only a fact, and the fact was this: that the boy Caleb had been gone 4 days, that no boy afoot survives 4 days in this, that I was almost surely going up that mountain to find a frozen thing that had once been somebody's brother, and that I would have to come back down and stand in front of a girl praying at a deathbed and tell her the God of her small world, her papa, her Caleb, the 2 men who were her whole ceiling and floor, that they were both gone at once, and she was 7 and alone in the mountains with a stranger who whittled horses. I named that fear Nell because it was her. It was the moment I would break her. That was the thing I was afraid of, more than the cold, more than the climb. I was afraid of the look that would come into those creek ice eyes when I told her. Toward the second dawn the wind died the way it does, all at once like a shout cut off. In the sudden quiet I could hear the fire and the father's ragged breath, and once a whisper, Nell asleep sitting up against the wall, still at it even in her dreams, the words worn down to almost nothing now, just breath with a shape to it. Bring him home. I got up quiet. I checked the man, still with us, barely. I banked the fire high and set the last of the wood where the girl could reach it, and I put the little wooden horse in her sock-mittened hand while she slept, and her fingers closed on it without waking, the way a baby's will. I wrote her a note, though I did not know if she could read. Gone up the mountain to look, back by dark or morning, keep the fire, eat. A field. I have kept few things from that winter, but I kept the habit of that note, the small foolish promises we make to children so they will not feel the size of the dark. Then I went out to Deacon in the blue first light, and I looked up at the mountain where the storm had gone, all white and silent and enormous and hiding whatever it was hiding, and I felt the fear I had named turn over in my chest and settle in for the climb. I found the boys' track a 1/4 mile above the cabin, or the ghost of it, a line of filled-in dents heading the wrong way. Not toward the settlement below where the doctor was, up, higher. Into the country where nobody sane goes in winter, where the only things living are the things with fur and the things that were there before any of us and would be there after. I stopped Deacon and I looked at that track a long time. A boy going for a doctor goes down. This boy had gone up, which meant one of 2 things. Either he had gotten turned around in the storm and climbed to his death by accident, blind and freezing and lost. Or he had gone up on purpose, to someone, to something. And that possibility opened a door in my mind that I did not like the shape of, because the only people who wintered high in that range, the only people who could live where the boy's track was leading, were people the settlements had 100 hard names for, and had spent 100 hard years teaching their children to fear. I took out my knife. I took out a fresh scrap of pine, and with my mule standing patient in the killing cold and the boy's track running up into the white like a question, I gave the new fear a name. I named it the truth because I did not yet know what it was, and because I already knew, somehow, in the animal part of a man that knows things before his head will let him, that whatever waited up that mountain was going to be true in a way that would change the shape of everything I thought I understood about that boy, and that girl, and the dying father, and the people we had all been taught to be afraid of. Then I clicked my tongue at Deacon, and we started up. The mountain in the day after a storm is the most beautiful and the most murderous country God ever made, and it does not see any contradiction in being both. The sky had come up hard blue, the kind of blue that has no mercy in it, and the sun off the new snow was a thing that could blind a man for life if he stared. I had my eyes near shut, squinting through my lashes, reading the country in slices. Deacon fought the deep drifts with his ears back, and I got off and broke trail ahead of him where the snow came to my thigh, and my breath froze in my beard until I wore a mask of my own ice. I whittled nothing that morning. A man breaking trail through belly-deep snow has no hands to spare for fear. I have found that useful over the years. Hard work is the one thing that will crowd terror out of a body, there being only so much room in us for feeling and effort both. The boy's track came and went. The wind had scoured it off the ridges and left it in the hollows, so I lost it and found it and lost it again, and each time I found it, it was still going up, and each time it went up, my certainty hardened. A lost boy wanders. This track did not wander. It ran straight as a plumb line toward the high shoulder of the mountain, toward the black timber, toward the place I did not want it to go. Around midday, I found where he had fallen. There was a scuffed place in the snow, half filled, where a body had gone down and struggled and got up. I read it the way you read a page. Here he fell. Here he lay a while, the melt print of a body, an arm, a hip. Here he tried to rise and could not. Here, and this is the part that stopped my heart in my chest for a beat, here something else came. Other tracks joined his, made after over the top of the stormfill, fresher. Moccasin, not boot, more than one. They came down to the scuffed place from the timber above, and where the boy's struggling track ended, the moccasin tracks turned and went back up, and beside them now in the snow was a new mark, two parallel drags smooth close together. The drag of a travois, or of a body carried by the heels. I knelt and I put my bare fingers in the print of one of those moccasins, and I felt the cold come up into my bones, and I made myself think it through instead of feeling it through, which is the only way a man survives thinking about such things. Apache. Had to be. This was their high country, older than any deed filed in any town below. They had found the boy where he fell. And then they had taken him, up, into their winter, dead or alive I could not say from the snow. And there was not one single thing in 40 years of stories I had been told that let me hope it was mercy. I want to be honest with you, because this is where the truth I named starts to show its face, and if I clean myself up in the telling, then the whole thing means nothing. I was afraid, and under the fear, uglier than the fear, was everything I had ever been taught. I had ridden with men who had done evil to these people, and I had ridden with these people's kin who had done evil back, and the ledger of that country was written in a red that never dried. And I stood there over that travois drag, and my first thought, God forgive me, my first thought, was of the girl praying in the cabin. And my second thought was that I would be climbing up now not to save a boy, but to recover what was left of him. And my third thought was a coward's thought, which was that maybe I should turn around and go back down and lie, and tell Nell her brother was lost clean in the snow, and never let her know the rest. I did not turn around, but I wanted on the record that I thought about it. The man who tells you he never thought about the easy lie is a man you should not trust with anything true. I climbed on. Deacon would not come the last of it. The timber was too thick, the snow too deep. So I tied him in a stand of spruce where the wind couldn't reach him, and I broke the rest of the trail on foot, following the drag marks up into the black timber where the light went green and old, and the branches held their loads of snow so still it was like walking into a held breath. I smelled their smoke before I saw the camp. Not thin this time, not dying. A living smoke layered, several fires, meat, hide, the particular sweetness of certain barks they burn. My mouth watered against my will, and I hated it for watering. I came up the last of the slope on my belly, the last stretch, the way you learn to when your life has depended on not being seen, and I looked down through a screen of spruce into a hollow that the mountain kept hidden from the world, and I saw them. Wickiups, a half-dozen, humped with snow, smoke rising straight in the still cold air. Horses in a rope corral, shaggy with winter, breathing steam. A woman scraping a hide. Two children, and the sight of them did something to the machine of fear in me, jammed a gear, because I had not somehow pictured children throwing snow at each other and shrieking the way children shriek in every language there is. Men at the far fire. Old people. A whole world wintering that the world below did not believe was a world at all, only a threat. And in the middle of the camp, near the largest fire, wrapped in robes with only his face showing, propped up like a chief, was a boy with hair the color of a fox in summer. Caleb had to be. Nell's hair the same fox red, gone gray-white at the edges now with what I feared was frost, but he moved. He turned his head. He was alive. A woman knelt beside him and put something to his lips, and he drank it, and I lay in the snow above that hidden camp with my heart going like a hammer, and I could not make the picture in front of my eyes fit the picture I had carried up the mountain. They had not killed him, they had not left him. They had carried a settler boy, one of us, one of the people who had spent generations trying to erase them, up a mountain in a blizzard, and they had wrapped him in their own robes and were feeding him from their own thin winter stores, of which they can have had little enough to spare. I did not understand it. I lay there in the cold, and I did not understand it, and the not understanding was worse in its way than fear had been, because fear at least is a thing a man knows the shape of. This had no shape I owned. I must have moved, or the light caught my knife, or one of those old people had ears that heard the mountain the way I heard smoke. Because between one breath and the next the camp changed. The children were gone, snatched, vanished. The women had risen. And 3 men were standing at the edge of the trees below me with bows, not drawn but held. And one of them was looking directly at the place where I lay as if the spruce screen were made of glass. And I understood that I had been seen for some time, perhaps since the timber, perhaps since the drag marks, and that my life was, at that moment, a thing being decided by people I had been taught could not be reasoned with. So I did the only thing there was to do. I stood up. Slow. I set my rifle down in the snow in plain sight, and I stood there with my hands open and empty and my heart in my mouth, a fool of 60 in a mask of his own frozen breath, and I let them look at me, and I looked back. The man in front was maybe 40. There was gray at his temple and a scar that pulled one eyebrow up so that he seemed to be permanently, coldly curious. He looked at me a long time. Then his eyes went to the camp below, to the fox-haired boy by the fire, and back to me, and something moved behind his face, some arithmetic of his own, some weighing. And I understood that he had done a sum and gotten an answer, that he knew who I had come for, that he had perhaps known someone would come. He said something to the men beside him. Then he looked back at me, and he did a thing I did not expect. He raised one hand, palm out, not in threat but in the old sign that means stop, wait, be still, the sign you make to a spooked horse, to a child at a cliff edge. And then he turned that same hand over and gestured once down toward the camp, toward the fire, toward the boy. Come, the gesture said, come and see. And under his pulled-up, scarred eyebrow his eyes were not the eyes I had been taught to expect. They were tired, and they were sad, and they held something I could only call a grim, unwilling patience. The look of a man who has been made to carry something he did not choose and has decided to carry it well because the alternative is to be as small as the thing that was done to him. I picked up my rifle, slow, and he let me, which told me more than any word could have, and I slung it on my back where it could do no quick harm. And I started down the slope into the camp of the people I had feared my whole life, toward the boy I had come to save, who had not needed saving, who had been saved already by them. They let me come to the fire. The women drew the children back but did not run, watching me with flat, hard eyes that had good reason to be flat and hard. Up close the boy was worse than he'd looked from above. His face was a boy's face still under the fox hair, freckled, maybe 16, but 2 fingers of his left hand were black to the knuckle, and would not be his much longer, and there was a gray patch on one cheek, and his eyes, when they found me, were fevered and swimming. "You real?" he said, his voice cracked on it. "Or am I dreaming a white man now, too?" "Real enough," I said. "Your pa sent me, your sister's praying you home, your Caleb." At his father's name his whole face came apart, and then he pulled it back together, the same way Nell had, the exact same way, and I thought, that is a thing that family taught each other, how to catch a chin before it falls, and it near broke me. "Is Pa?" he started. "He's alive," I said, "when I left him. Nell's minding him." The boy shut his eyes. Tears cut 2 clean lines down through the grime and the frost gray of his face. "I couldn't get down," he whispered. "The storm turned me. I climbed wrong. I climbed up. I couldn't. I was gonna die on that mountain, and I knew it, and I thought about Nell finding out I'd left her alone with. He couldn't finish it. And then they come, out of the snow." I thought he looked at the scarred man who stood over us listening, and something passed between the boy and the man that I did not have the key to. "I thought they'd finish me," Caleb said, very low, like a confession. "That's what I thought when I saw him. God help me, that's what I thought. And instead." He couldn't say the rest. He didn't have to. The rest was all around us. The robe, the fire, the drink the woman had put to his lips, the black fingers that would be cut and dressed by hands that owned no debt to him, in a camp that had every reason under that hard blue sky to have let him freeze. I looked up at the scarred man, and I said the only thing I had, which was, "Why?" I do not know how much English he had. Some, I think. The mountains traded in more than furs, and few men in that country were only one thing. He looked at me under the pulled eyebrow. And then he crouched slow across the fire from me, and he held up 2 fingers, the boy's 2 black fingers. He pointed at them, then held up his own 2 fingers, and then he pointed at himself, at his own chest, and then he pointed away off down the mountain, toward the world below, and his face when he did it was a face carved out of something no fire would ever warm all the way through. I did not understand it then. 2 fingers, himself, the world below. I understood it the next day, and when I understood it, I wish to God I had gone on being ignorant, because the truth that man was pointing at was the heaviest thing I have ever been handed, and it is the reason I have been trying to whittle its shape out of pine wood for 20 years and have never once gotten it right. But that is part 3. That night they let me sleep by their fire, a thing I would not have believed possible, and I lay awake under strange stars listening to a language I did not know being spoken low and tired around me. And I watched the woman who had fed the boy check on him twice in the dark the way a mother checks a child, and I named my last fear of that long day. I named it tomorrow because I did not yet know what tomorrow would ask of me, but I could feel it coming the way you feel weather in an old break, and I was right to be afraid of it. The scarred man's name, I learned that night from the boy who had learned a little of it in his fevered days among them, was Tsela. And the woman who fed him and checked him in the dark was called Datsy, and she was Tsela's wife, and the reason I did not understand any of it yet was that I did not know what Tsela and Datsy had lost, or when, or to whom. I learned it in the gray before dawn, and I did not learn it in words. I woke because someone was sitting near me still, watching the fire. It was Tsela. He had a piece of wood in his hands and a small blade, and I am not making this up, I would not dare he was whittling. Slow, without looking at it, the way I do, the way a man does when his hands need something to hold so his mind can go where it has to go. We looked at each other across that small work, 2 men of no shared language doing the same foolish thing with our hands to keep from drowning, and I felt the strangest kinship I have ever felt with a living soul, and I have never felt its like since. He saw me see what he was making. He turned it so I could look. It was small and rough, and it was a horse. A colt, legs too long, exactly the shape my own hands make. The shape I had put in Nell's sleeping fingers 2 days before, and I do not know what to tell you about that except that the world is stranger and more woven together than the men below the mountain will ever let themselves believe. Then Tsela set his colt down, and he took from inside his robe a different thing, an old thing, worn smooth by handling, and he put it in my hand and closed my fingers on it the way you'd hand a man something you could not bear to hold any longer, and I opened my hand to the firelight and looked. It was a carving of a child, a boy, small the way you'd make a thing to remember someone by, and it was old and the wood was dark with years of a thumb rubbing over it in the dark, the way a man rubs a thing when the grief comes on him and there is nothing to be done but hold what's left. And I understood the 2 fingers. He had held up 2 fingers over the boy's frostbit hand, 2, and then himself, and then the world below. 2 winters ago, Caleb pieced the rest for me later, from what he'd gathered, and from what Datsy's face told when Tsela made me understand it. A party had come up from the settlements. The kind of party that comes when stock goes missing or a rumor spreads or men have been drinking their fear all winter and need to spend it on something. They had found this band's camp, and in what they did, Tsela and Datsy had lost a son, a boy, not much younger than the fox-haired boy sleeping by their fire. 2 winters gone, and the carving in my hand was all the boy that was left to them. And into their winter, out of the snow, 2 years later, God or the mountain or whatever it is that keeps the terrible accounts of this world had delivered them a settler boy. One of those people, the people who had taken their son, half dead, freezing, helpless, handed to them. Theirs to do with as the world below would surely have done, given the chance reversed. And they had wrapped him in their robes, and fed him from their winter, and Datsy had checked him in the dark the way she must once have checked the boy the party took. They had looked at the thing the world handed them, a chance to balance the red ledger, a settler life for the settler-taken life, an eye for an eye that no court below would even have called a crime, and they had set it down. They had chosen not to become the thing that had been done to them. That was the truth the mountain man saw. That was what Tsela pointed at with his 2 fingers and his hand upon his own broken chest. Not look how helpless your boy is. He was saying, I lost mine, to yours, and still. He was showing me the exact size of what he had refused to do, so that I would carry it down the mountain and know it, so that at least one of us, at least one man from below, would know that it had happened, and what it had cost, and that it had been a choice and not a weakness, made by a man who had every reason and chose the harder road with his own boys carving worn smooth in his robe. I have met men in churches who talked a great deal about mercy. I never met mercy itself, the true and costly article, until I met it in a hidden camp from a man the world below had taught me to fear, and it did not look like the pictures. It looked tired. It looked like a scar that pulled an eyebrow up. It looked like a man whittling a colt in the dark so his hands would have something to hold that was not grief. We came down the mountain that day because we had to. Caleb could not stay, the black in his fingers was climbing, and it needed a doctor's saw or it would take his arm and then his life. Sella and two others helped me rig a travois and get the boy onto Deacon's back, and Datsy pressed a pouch of something into the boy's good hand, medicine or food I never knew. And when Caleb tried to thank her, his ruined face working, she stopped him with a hand flat against the air. No, not because he was not owed a debt, because some things are not to be paid back, because to be thanked would have made it a trade, and it was not a trade. It was a gift, and a gift has no price, and to name a price is to unmake it. I turned at the timber's edge and looked back. Sella stood by his fire with his boy's carving in his fist. He raised his hand, the same sign, palm out, be still, go careful, and I raised mine. And that was all, and I have never seen him again, and I never will, and there is not a hard winter comes that I do not think of that hollow and hope the smoke still rises straight from it, and fear that it does not. We reached the cabin at full dark. I will not stretch this part, because the truth of it is short, and there is no kindness in dressing it long. The father had died in the afternoon. Nell had known, of course she had known. She had been watching that breath and counting the silences same as I had. And she had done what a 7-year-old does, which is she had covered him to the chin with the good blanket, and she had sat by him and kept the fire, because I had told her to keep the fire, and she had kept it. When we came in, she was by the hearth with the little wooden colt in her sock-mitten hand, and she looked up, and she saw her brother alive on the mule's back, ruined and fevered but alive. And then she looked at the still shape under the good blanket that she already knew about, and I watched the two truths meet in that child's face at the same instant. The brother home, the father gone, the prayer answered and unanswered in the very same breath. She did not wail. I almost wish she had. She just went to Caleb, who had got down and propped in the doorway, and she put her arms around as much of him as she could reach, careful of the bad hand, though nobody told her which one it was. She just knew, the way family knows, and she pressed her face into his coat. And she said, so quiet I near missed it, the same words, the last time I ever heard her say them, only changed now, only true now. You came home. Not bring him home, not a prayer anymore. A fact. The only one she had left, and she held to it the way you hold the one dry match. I stayed with them through the burying, which took 2 days of fire on the frozen ground, and through the worst of Caleb's fever after the doctor came up and took the 2 fingers. And I saw them settled with the family that took them in down below. A hard, childless couple who'd wanted young ones and got 2 half-grown and grieving, which is its own kind of mercy and its own kind of hard. And then I did what I do, which is I went back to my mountains, because a man like me does not know how to stay where the smoke is warm. Deacon disapproved. Deacon always disapproves. But I go back some years to that valley. And when I do, I bring the boy, the man now, he's a grown man with a wife and a farm, and a hand that's short 2 fingers that he tells his children a bear got. I bring him a thing I've carved. And he brings his sister, who is grown too, with fox-red hair going the first gray at the temples, and green eyes still like creek ice. And every time she sees me, she holds my hand a moment longer than a body needs to. And neither of us says the reason, because the reason is up a mountain in a hollow that the world below still does not believe is a world. They never knew the whole of it. Caleb knew some, he was there, fevered, gathering pieces. But he never knew about the 2 fingers and the carving worn smooth and the sun taken 2 winters gone. I never told them. I decided that on the way down the mountain, and I have never gone back on it, and I am still not sure I was right. It is the heaviest choice I made in the whole business, heavier than the climb, heavier than the burying, the choice of what truth to hand a child and what truth to carry alone. Because part of me believes they had a right to know what saved them, and the whole size of it, and the name of the man who chose not to balance the ledger with Caleb's freezing body. And part of me believes that if I'd told them, it would have become a thing they owed instead of a thing they were given. And Datsy had put her hand up against the air to say no to exactly that, and I had no right to undo it. So I carry it. That is what the carving is all these years, the one I have never gotten right. I sit by my fire in the high country with my knife and a scrap of pine, and I try to make the shape of what Sella handed me, and it always comes out a horse, a colt, legs too long because that is the only shape my hands know, and it is not the shape of the thing at all. The thing has no shape. Mercy that costs the man everything and asks nothing back. You cannot whittle that. I have used up a small forest trying. I named a great many fears that winter. The storm, the girl's breaking face, the truth up the mountain, tomorrow. But there was one I never named because I did not find it until I was old, and by then I had given up the naming. It is this, that the world below will go its whole life believing the mercy runs only one direction, downhill, from us to them. That no one down there will ever believe a hidden camp of the people they fear took in one of their freezing children and gave up the one payment the world had finally handed them. That the truest thing I ever saw will die with me, up here in the smoke, uncarved. The girl asked her papa to bring her brother home. Her papa could not. A man she'd been taught to fear did it instead, and asked for nothing, and I am the only one below the mountain who knows the whole of it, and I am getting old, and my hands are not as sure with the knife as they were. Caleb's youngest is a girl, fox-red hair. She likes the little horses I carve. Last time I was down, she climbed in my lap and turned one over in her small hands and asked me where I learned to make them, and I opened my mouth to tell her.